Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Arvil DeWitt Akers, Gerald Franklin Apperson, Timothy Harold Artman, James Allen Asher, Melvin Baker, Chadwick McFall Barber, Alan Jensen Bardock, William Edward Barnes, Kenneth Donald Barry, Stephen Douglas Bartman, Douglas Martin Beckman, Charles Lawrence Bifulci, Howard Matthew Bisson, Freddie Andre Blackburn, Donald Ray Blair, Russell Keith Blatz, Samuel Blunt, William Innes Bouton Jr., Daniel Raymond Bowman, Stephen Merle Brown, Larry Irwin Burke, James Larry Burney, Elbert Wayne Bush, Gail W. Butcher Jr., William L. Campbell Jr., Francis Eugene Cannon, James Howard Cartwright, Robert Don Case, Leo Carl Casey Jr., Johnny A. Chambers, John Thomas Chapman, Del Ross Claiborne, Richard Garland Clark, Denver Dewey Colburn Jr., Philon Herman Cole, Wayne Michael Cole, Nathan John Cole Jr., David William Coppernall, Lawrence Cornell Covington, Robert Michael Kramer, Robert Leo Crawley, Willard Winston Croy, Keith Royal Wilson Curry, Hovey Rice Curry, Lawrence Joseph Sir, John Wesley Darr, Michael Robert Day, Larry Lamar Dean, William Lawrence Dean, Larry Jean Deering, Robert Deegan, Stephen Haig Demerjon, Daniel Diaz, Gary Philip Dietz, Warren Lee Donahue, Leonard Edward Dornack, Gerald Joseph Downey, Robert Darrell Duff, Kenneth Francis DuPont, Ishmael Eddy, Philip John Eberhart, George Walter Ellis, Alton Jimmy Fennell, Richard William Fisher,
Ronald Lee Fox, Roger Christoph Foxworth, Glenn Wayne Freeman, Daniel Raymond Fullwider, Enrique Lorenzo Garcia Jr., Vincente Garza, Alan Clark Gile, Xavier Gomez, Angel L. Gonzalez Madera, Terry Eugene Gorslein, Robert William Green, Thomas Allen Grimes, Michael Jennings Hall, Robert E. Lee Hamilton, Howard Emerson Hanson, Jr., Lynn Arden Harris, Billy Wayne Hartwick, Ronald Lee Hetland, Alan Bruce Hill, George MacDonald Hines, George Emil Hans, Ronald Frank Hopkins, John Roy Hulbert, Gerald Edward Humphrey, Donnie Rice Jackson, Ronald Edward Yanka, Jose Halcón Javines, Bobby W. Job, Bobby Ray Jones, Halcott Pride Jones, Jr., Edward James Justice, Dana James Coberley, Donald Wayne Keep, Patrick James Keel, Stephen Benjamin Kirshner, Kenneth Thomas Kleppen, Richard Arthur Knutson, Jamie LeBoy, Joseph Mark Lowinger, Manuel Alonzo Lauderio, William Ralph Lawless, Jr., Richard Grego Lightbourne, Paul Johnson Lively, Robert James Mann, Michael David Marks, Timmy G. Mattingly, Craig Nolan May, James Lewis McCabe, Jr., James Avery Messick, James Irvin Miller, Arnez Franklin Miller, Jr., Jonathan Miskimen, Jr., James Carroll Mitchell, Jr., Rainier K. Morgan, Glenn Mark Morrison, David Donnell Nicholson, John Gary Niedermeyer, John Edward Nearer, Martin Edward O'Grady, Nelson Montag O'Neill, Victor Ocasio Jr., Michael Pierce Oliver, Cecile Chauncey Olson, Bennett Walfred Olson,
Thomas B. Orr, Jr., Jerry Patrick, James E. Payton, Ronnie Dean Pendergraft, Juan J. Perez, Clyde Raymond Phillips, Ronald Ernest Pickert, Richard A. Pierce, James Albert Pintar, William Rollison Polglass, Millard Ernest Price, Jr., Guy Jerry Protano, Jr., Jerry Earl Pry, Hubert J. Purefoy, Harold Kenneth Rappaport, Daniel Reese, Jr., John Michael Rice, Norman Franklin Ridley, John Arthur Rives, Jr., John Leo Robinson, John Patrick Roche, Carlos Mario Rodriguez, Ralph O. Rodriguez, Philip Ray Repke, Richard Allen Rumley, James Robert Rutledge, Jr., Louis Lawrence Shoutteet, Jr., Frederick Lloyd Schramm, Kenneth Schroem, Charles Lewis Scott, Jr., Wallace Claire Schaefer, Jr., James Robert Shaw, David Lawrence Shee, Harold Wayne Sigmund, Harold Sims, Stephen Slusher, Charles Herbert Smith, Haley William Smith, Billy Eugene Smith, John Smith, Jr., Felix Solis, Ned Alexander Soul, Larry Eugene Stevens, John Emmanuel Stewart, Stephen James Stewart, William Sherrill Stinson, Gerald Dwayne Stonemetz, J.C. Story, Philip Stanley Strand Jr., Douglas J. Sullivan, Arnold Jose Sullivan, Fennel Tate, Gary Allen Teeter, William Edward Tiemann, Michael Vincent Timmons, James Philman Tyner, John Joseph Ugino, Michael Eugene Vogt, Vernon Bernabe Venegas, Michael Clarence Vickery, Florenzo G. Villanueva, Robert Lamont Walker Jr., Anthony Ronald Watkins, Joseph Michael Watson, Dennis Ray Watterson, Raymond White, Craig Preston White, Nathan C. Williams, Bill Fred Williams Jr., Robert Charles Wilson, Mickey Allen Wilson, Gordon Richard Whitman, Donald Woolley, Robert Leroy Wright, Robert Ernest Young, Ewald Zerfass.